Can we talk a little bit about source energy? I'm driving in the car and she'll say, "What are you thinking about?" And I say, "Source energy." And I have this vision of planets and cosmic waves and I see things in my mind of what I think source energy is. We are in creation of this universe and planets and everything, and from a higher observer standpoint that I'm, I guess, trying to understand, but
Precisely.
Getting away from the feeling maybe and wanting to see something.
Well, what you are doing is trying to describe or articulate or define or interpret what you're sensing vibrationally into an imagery that you can make sense of. And that's all fine. It's a little bit, however, like driving and your fiance saying, "What are you thinking about?" And you're saying, "Electricity." And she says, "What do you mean?" And instead of defining some amazing contraption that electricity is powering, you're describing the power line or the grid line. And in other words, what we want you to focus upon is that this power or energy or electricity or source cannot be separated from the manifestation that is the furthest extension of it. And the most satisfying conversation to have about it is about this furthest most extension of it. So the idea that occurs to you, the concept, the interaction, in other words, the meshing of you with others in life, that's the most delicious way to understand, to describe or define or understand source. Because as we stand as non-physical energy, as the source of that which you are, it is through that which you are living that we are most defined. You see what we are getting at? Humans keep getting it backwards. They see themselves as here, and they somehow just accept it, we suppose because it's impossible not to accept that you're here. And then they work backwards trying to define how they got here, trying to understand what source is. And what we attempt to do with nearly every conversation like this we have is that we want you to understand that yes, source existed before you know yourself as yourself, but you were that source energy. And a part of that source energy became you, but now as you are living in your body and shooting off these expansive rockets of desires, that source energy part is flowing through you and becoming the vibrational equivalent of the idea. So this energy that you are seeing, we want you to see the picture as it's this consciousness, and let's use the word consciousness and beingness. It's this consciousness and beingness. It's this beingness that bead and then bead in your body and then bees in this vortex. And when you consciously in your physical beingness acknowledge the wholeness of these two vibrational relationships, and you ask your emotions to guide you into alignment with it, then you get to be that very source energy that you are trying to define. And when you're inside of it looking out, that's when you feel that all is oneness that you were describing. That's why you said, I think maybe that might be what death is. Maybe I'm done. In other words, can you feel how you have been experiencing the completion of the cycle that we are describing here? And yet we're saying, but now what? Now what? In other words, in the same way that electricity is nothing until you plug something in. You get what we're talking about? The electricity is fine, but plug something in and make it manifest and real and tangible and experiential, you see. And that's the way source is. Source is nothing without this leading edge expansion, which is you. enough? Further back. When you are first born, almost all of you respond very strongly to the people who are around you. And they make it pretty clear, because they've forgotten something really important usually. They make it pretty clear to you early on that your happiness depends upon your pleasing them. They don't tell you about this gap. They don't tell you about this vibrational range between who you are physically and who you are non-physically. They don't explain to you that there is a vibrational harmony that is possible, and when you feel love or joy or appreciation or passion, you're tuned into it. And when you feel ornery or afraid or depressed, you're not tuned into it. Instead, most of them say to you, I've been sorting the conditions of the world for quite a long time, and I've joined together with others, and we've concluded that these are the things that are appropriate for you to do, and these other things are inappropriate for you to do. And as you get to know them, you notice that they cluster together in very defined groups, and every group has a different set of rules. But you're born into your set of rules, and almost from the beginning, you begin to train yourself to respond to their response. So you perform a behavior, and if they approve of it, they give you positive feedback in the form of smiling and rewarding words or rewarding experience. But if you displease them, the opposite occurs. They frown. Maybe they punish. They discourage. And so you let their response to you train you into vibrational patterns that we call beliefs. Now, all of that is serving you all right. In other words, you're born into stability usually. You're born into an environment that you come to understand, and you live within the parameters of that environment. But what happens to you, the longer you live and the more exposure to life you have, the more you personally expand vibrationally. And we have never met a human, and we've met all of them. We have never met a human who gleaned from their societal environment, parents and educators and peers. We've never met one single person who gathered enough resources from that environment that surrounded them to keep them up to speed with who they are becoming. This is our way of saying to you, if your awareness of how others are responding to you is the guidance that you use, then you cannot possibly begin to be fulfilled, because they can't possibly give you the feedback that the source within you is giving you. So that's our best sales job ever, about getting you to the place where you want to at least acknowledge that there is a source energy part of you who represents guidance that is supreme, that is constant and steady and stable and real. And that if you will pay attention to the emotion that you feel, you will know in any and every moment whether you're in alignment with who you really are or not. Allowing alignment or disallowing alignment. Allowing alignment or resisting alignment. In the state of allowing or in the state of resisting. In the state of thriving or in the state of less than thriving. In the state of joy or in the state of diminished joy. In the state of clarity or in the state of confusion. In the state of knowing who you are or in the state of not knowing who you are. In the state of seeing your world through the eyes of Source, or through the state of seeing your life through the eyes of someone who sort of pinched it off in an attempt to satisfy sporadically those requests that others are making of you. In other words, your source not only knows who you are, but is who you are, and holds steady a signal calling you eternally toward that furthest expanded version of you. And you can feel the call all day, every day. And when you're moving in the direction of it, you feel happy. And when you're pulling against it, you feel the opposite. In other words, you can feel the relationship that you have with the source within you, with the expanded part of you all day, every day. Because you're either joyful or not. You're either frisky or not. You're either clear-minded or confused. In other words, you can feel in every single moment, if you will pay attention, how you're doing in relationship to who you are. And when you begin, first when you accept that this vibrational version of you exists, that it is the whole of you, that it is the heart of you, that it is the soul of you, that it is the good of you, that it is the best of you, that it is the source of you, that it is the God of you, that it exists and calls you. And then you say, my emotions let me know how I'm responding to the call. I can feel my vibrational alignment or not. Then you become the emotionally sensitive being who pays attention to the way you feel, who guides your thought, word, and deed into harmony with what the source within you knows, rather than within some group who is surrounding you, who is asking for your behavioral response. And we don't want to hurt your feelings, and we don't want to diminish their value, but they're always asking you to serve them for their purposes. And many of you have come to believe that that's what good life is, serving others. And we say the reality of it is you cannot really serve another in any way that is effective or value unless you've first chosen alignment with who you are. Because unless you're tuned in, tapped in, turned on to this source energy, you have nothing to give them, you see. Esther had the television on in the hotel room the other day, just sort of moving from tragedy to tragedy. It was just really interesting how every single selection was full of something horrible that had gone wrong to someone. And when she did find a comedy, it was full of horrible things too. She said to Jerry, I just want to pull the covers up over my head. And Jerry said, or you could just turn the television off. We don't have to expose ourselves to all of the details of life. Esther said, it's just overwhelming to see the way people are banging around together. They're having trouble in relationships, and they're hurting each other, and they're maiming each other, and they're lying to each other, and they're stealing from each other. And we say, they're just mixing it up. They're mixing it up, and they're putting more into their vortex. But what Esther was feeling is, in all that all are living, they have created a version of life that most are holding themselves dramatically apart from. Because most are trying to sort out the details of manifestation. In other words, rather than paying attention to the way you feel, so that pre-manifestation you're lining up with the best of all that you are and holding it steady, practicing the vibration of it until the best of what you want manifests. Most people are just sifting through what is and talking about it. Most people are sifting through what is and talking about it in terms of its rightness, in terms of how they could stop the parts of it that they don't want. In other words, when you are a physically focused person and you are dealing primarily or only with the reality of what is, you haven't even begun to do what you came here to do. Because what is, you were never intending to sift through what is and evaluate it and make long historical documents about it. You were never meant to compare what is in one segment to what is in another segment with the intention of defining the rightness of an entire society or a world and dictating to everyone else the way they live. That was never your intention. That would be like saying, we're going to a buffet and we will decide what is the one thing to eat. And then we will remove all other things from the buffet. And then we won't call it a buffet anymore. We'll call it food. The food. This is the food. This is the food we've all come to eat. The food. Don't you dare ask for anything different than that. This is the food.